G'day folks, Heath Home coming at you from a nice sunny day here in Ibiza, a nice November sunny day here in Ibiza. I wanted to do a video today that's going to be part of a series of videos where I start off track ideas from scratch in my studio based on how the first couple go, comments and feedback, and if people are finding the material useful. I'd then like to sort of eventually make these a live YouTube stream to my channel, and people obviously can then comment and interact with me live while it's going on. I'm going to make these sessions doing tracks from scratch that are from different genres of music, electronic music. Today I'm going to pick on a favorite of mine, which is minimal or micro house. You could say the Romanian sound from think of artists like Raresh and Trauma and I.O. Mullen. So I'm going to be just starting a track idea in this style. I'm going to be using Ableton Live 10, which is my DAW, the DAW I specialize in. I'm going to use only built-in instruments and effects that are Ableton devices. So even if you're as far back as owning Ableton 9 and haven't upgraded, you should be able to follow along with this and use these techniques. What about Ableton Live 11, folks? If you're following the news there, that looks amazing. I can't wait till that comes out early next year. There's a lot of things that obviously take Ableton, as always, up to higher levels of being a very powerful DAW, and also there's finally some improvements and things that we've been hoping that will be added to the software that will make life a lot easier. So yeah, without too much more discussion, let's dive in and crack on with the session today. So what I'm going to be doing today is a musical idea. So we could say a lead or a sequence or something, and that'll be, let's say, video 1, and then we'll carry on with more videos where I'll add a bass to that, and then the drums, and then some atmospheres, drones, background sort of sounds, and push the track along. So we're going to start off with a musical idea. If I think about the types of music I'm talking about, that is that micro minimal house. If we think about, for starters, the tempo, BPM of the track, most of that sort of genre fits between 124 and maybe 130. If you're looking at an artist like Sweely, who I'm also a big fan of, he's up there around 130. I think I'm going to pick a tempo somewhere in the middle, so I'm going to go up here to my tempo and choose 126 as the starting point. And you might notice there's not a lot in the window here in the session view, but I do have a clip, an audio track with a clip inside of it. This is a drum loop, and it's a favorite drum loop, and I'm just using this as a guide. Basically, we can obviously write our melodies and elements to the metronome, but in my case, I quite often like to start with just a favorite drum loop that I know that has all the right sort of elements in it, and then write my parts against that. And then when it comes to the drums, I'll just be deleting this loop out of the project and start my own drums from scratch. So it's just there as a guide, and it sounds like this. So just a nice fat drum loop, so we've got something that we can write up our idea against. So let's have a look at some techniques here of how we can go about getting a kind of cool idea in the style of the music that I'm talking about, this micro minimal house, using just Ableton Live devices. So sometimes a fun thing to do is maybe if you've got some sample packs laying around, sometimes you'll find in sample packs one shots of sort of tonal notes or chords. And what could be nice is, playing a chord that's already created and using its texture and timbre and sound qualities and sort of replaying it. So we're kind of resampling chords. We could obviously go in here today and start from zero with any of Ableton's synths, put in a chord, program in a chord, play that, record that, and then sort of do the process we're doing. So it's really up to you. But in my case, I happen to have some sample packs, even some sample packs that I've created myself kicking around, and inside these sample packs I have a lot of these nice chord sounds, and they, in some cases they're very analog, recorded from real analog synths. In other cases they're digital, so they have the nice texture about them and tones or tonality already. and they're also you know, already a melodic chord from a particular scale or a particular musical idea. And with that, I would mention that you can really go further and investigate what is the actual musicality of the chord you're going to use, or you can just trust your ears to start with and see if it works with the musical idea we're going to create ourselves here today. If it doesn't, then obviously we might need to go in a bit deeper and find out what is the original chord, what music theory has been used. Anyway, so let's double click on a fresh MIDI track here. We're going to open up the bottom section down here. Let's grab ourselves a random chord from in here. So number 33 looks pretty good. I'm going to drag that and drop that down into that empty space. Ableton's going to do a very nice thing for me, and that is put that chord sample into a simpler. By the way, chord 33 sounds like that. And as you can hear, lots of different choices, so I can change that to chord 31, for example. All right, so we've got a chord in a simpler. I'm then going to go to this first empty MIDI clip slot, double click to open up a new MIDI clip. And what I'm going to do for starters here, I'm going to program a sequence into here. I'm not going to be using my push and playing along to the drum track and recording in a melodic idea. I'm going to actually program it into the piano roll here, into the sequencer. By default, we've got now one bar that's divided into 16th notes. So I'm just going to come over here and duplicate the loop. So I've got 2 bars and 2 lots of 16th notes. I'm also going to now put in a musical scale, which is going to be the basis of the idea I'm going to write. So I don't need to be low down in octaves. I think a melodic idea could be as low as the octave C2 up to somewhere like C5, but I don't need to be down low in C1 or C0, because that's where, you know, we're going to be putting something like a bass line. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to choose a minor scale, and I'm going to turn on my pencil tool, and I'm very quickly going to put in all the notes from A to A, which is only white notes going up from A to A. That gives me the shape of A minor, which I know is a minor scale, and I know A minor is only the white notes. And what I'm going to do is use this as a reference to build my musical idea around. So if I now select those notes, Command A will do it, or pull the mouse through them, and then use my left arrow on the keyboard, I can put it outside of this sequence area that we're going to be working in, and I've now got 1 octave of A minor. And for example, if I copy from the second note, the B, up, and select all those notes, hold down Alt Option on my keyboard, drag that out and slide that up to the B, I've now got 2 octaves of A minor, and I can obviously carry on working like that to create more octaves if I want to have more references up and down in the octave range. So we've got A minor, we've got 2 octaves. If we click Fold up here, we fold that down into just the notes that are inside A minor's scale. There's none of the black notes showing, and we know that if we program something in here, it's going to be A minor, and there's not going to be any problems at all. If we unfold it, we can obviously see the black keys as well as the white keys. But what I'm going to do now, I'm going to highlight all these notes, Command A, and I'm actually going to choose a different scale, but a minor scale. So I'm going to move the root note, the lowest note here that I've currently got, which is A1, and I'm going to move it just up 1 semitone to A sharp 1. And I'm going to now use A sharp minor as my scale for today. And because I had selected all these notes that were A minor and just kept the shape of them, I can move that scale anywhere up and down here to a different root note and find myself in C minor, B minor, D minor, D sharp minor, whatever. So it's a great hack and way to just kick off with a scale that's going to work and show you what notes are available to you in this scale. So next, I'm going to right click in the sequencer window, and I want to do one more thing before I start putting in some notes. And I want to change this grid from straight 16th notes to the triplet grid down the bottom here. in. So to get that up, I right click the mouse and choose triplet grid from the menu here, and you'll now see that I've actually got 6 notes in the place of where I originally had 4. And this can be quite a nice way to write something that's a bit more potentially polyrhythmic, or more funky, and that's kind of the vibe I'm going for here. So triplet grid on. So I'm going to turn on my pencil tool and I'm going to pop in a note and start to get this idea going. So maybe we start with the second note on the grid here. Let's play our drum loop and let's play the chord loop at the same time. Nice, starting to get a bit of a vibe happening. Don't have to go too carried away. I want to keep this quite sort of simple, so not too many notes. Okay, I'm pretty happy with that as a basic idea to start with. So I'm just going to highlight the mouse through all those notes, and I'm going to Command D and duplicate those over into the next bar. So we've got 1 bar, we've got 2 bars happening here. And what I might try with the second bar is to use some of Ableton's clip properties over here, and I might just try inversing this section of the MIDI notes over here. So what I've actually got is kind of, the pattern that we have in bar 1, but we've sort of inversed it. Let's have a listen to how that sounds. That's okay, but I think what I probably might go for here is actually the reverse. Same in the same area in the clip properties, and now we've sort of got a mirror. We've got it going up in progression here in the first bar, and then sort of the reflection of itself in the mirror going down. So let's have a listen to that. That's pretty cool. I might make a little variation here as well with this note. And this one here, maybe up an octave. I kind of preferred it back down than where there, so I'll put it back down, but I've just moved it now to the third. Yeah, so that sounds pretty cool. Now what I might do is change some note lengths around a little bit. We might do a little bit of a double up over here. That's what I was looking for. So we've got a nice little funky kind of groovy melody going on here. We've got a little bit of note length variation, and we've got some octaves in play, so we've got notes up an octave. And if we fold this down, you can see that I've been using the second interval, I've used the third interval of the scale, the fourth interval. What have we got here as well? Then we've got the root note, but an octave up, and then we've got the third note of the scale. So I'm just working around within the scale, and I'm using some notes which are harmonic, and then some that are inharmonic. That's a lesson for another day, which is which, but yeah. That's what I've done with the scale here. So let's go now to the simpler and have a look at that. And what I'll do right off the bat is go into Ableton and into categories. And I'm going to go to the MIDI effects category. And I'm going to add some extra flavor here and a bit of spice, because right now we've got a little bit of note length variation. We've got obviously musical notes in different positions within the scale, but all of our note velocities down the bottom here are all exactly uniform because I've not played this in by hand, and so there's no humanization of these notes at the moment. There's no hard pressed notes and soft pressed notes, so we don't have that nice sort of feel to this sequence as well. And obviously if we played this in and recorded it, we would have variations in note lengths, obviously in pitch, and we would also have velocity from how hard or soft we played the keys. So let's work around that by going to the MIDI effects in Ableton and grabbing the velocity MIDI effect. And if we just drag that down in front of the simpler, if we look at it in just very, very basic form, the velocity MIDI effect, if we look at these two parameters on the right, the out high and out low, they're basically the range of velocity, those two knobs. So out high at 127 is the hardest the note could be hitting, and out low is currently 1, and that could be the lowest velocity the note could be. So that's a pretty extreme range. I'm going to narrow that a bit, so I'm going to make my out high something like 118, and well, yeah, somewhere in there. And the out low, I don't want it to go down to almost silent, so I'm going to choose something around maybe 30. So I've now just shrunk the range a little bit between the hardest and highest notes, the hardest velocity of notes and the softest velocity notes. And then if we go to the knob down here, random, and we dial that into something like 20 or 30, Ableton will now randomize those notes for us in that sequence, and that's great. So we're now going to get a variation in velocity each time those notes are played. This is randomizing that. And I use these a lot in front of drum sounds and all sorts. So velocity MIDI effect, if you're not familiar with it, get familiar with it. It's a great way to bring that human velocity into a clip you're working on. So we've now got some velocity variation as well, which is great. So now I'm going to work on the sound a bit. So I'm going to open up the control tab over here on the simpler, and I'm just going to shape the ADSR envelope a little bit. So bring down the sustain, bring in the release a little bit. Move the decay in a bit so we get a nice sort of kind of like plucky envelope on that sound, and that's the sort of style I'm looking for here. Pretty cool with that. Random panning underneath the envelope here. I'm just going to dial some of that in, and that's going to move the sound around a bit left to right. We've got a nice bit of stereo happening now with it sound shifting around a bit left to right. And we're going to be looking for sources of modulation here to make this loop and this melodic idea much more interesting. We could also transpose the sample up in pitch or down. I'm pretty happy with where it is at 0 semitones, and then I'm going to come over to the filter envelope side of the simpler, and I'm going to choose the 12 dB slope, so that's the smoother curve of the filter instead of the more aggressive 24 dB. And I'm going to choose from this little box here where it says clean. If I drop that down, I'm going to choose one of these other filter algorithms. I like the OSR, and I'm going to add some drive. You'll notice when I choose that, when it's just clean, there is no knob over here to the right, but when I choose one of these algorithms, I get drive. So I can add some, filter character here to the sound as well, which is great. A little bit of resonance. Nice. And then we can also go into the filter envelope over here. If we click from the frequency to the envelope, and we can have a look at the filter frequency envelope, and I might just dial in a bit of amount here. And that changes also the character of how the filter is working on the sound. So if we now bring a little bit of the low pass filter down here, we start to roll off the highs. So we roll off the highs a bit, and if we move this envelope amount here, that also changes the character of what the filter is doing to our sound. So I'm pretty happy with that for the moment. That gives our sample a little bit of shape and character. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to use a Max for Live device. I'm going to grab from my Max for Live folder. You can go obviously into Max for Live itself. I have just a bit of a quick shortcut to some Max for Live devices I use all the time, but if not, we head to Max for Live Audio Effects and we're looking for LFO, and I'm going to grab one of those, drag it over here and drop it behind the simpler, and I might actually grab a couple of those while I'm in here, and I'm going to turn one of them off, and I'm going to have obviously one active. And now what I'm going to do is try out some pretty cool techniques here to, obviously, as I said, now we want to develop this sound into new areas and make it sound, you know, far more interesting. So I'm going to map this LFO here over to a target. I'm going to choose the start point of the sample of the chord here. So watch what happens now. The LFO moves the start point of the sample around, and we're now, when it's playing back this chord, it's playing back different sections of the chord, not just always from the start point of the sample, which brings quite a bit of character in. And so now I'm just going to adjust this LFO a bit. If I adjust the range here where it says 100%, I can bring it down a bit, and that'll mean it will sort of stay focused on the front part of the chord and work through it, so we can decide exactly how much of the chord it plays through. If it's 100%, you can see it works all the way from the far end of the chord to the beginning. I want to bring that back, dial that back in a little bit so it's not quite so extreme. We can then change the LFO rate, so it's either doing that quite rapidly, which gives us like a choppy kind of sound, or we could slow it down a bit and have that happen really slowly. That's quite nice. And then we can choose a different wave shape here where it says sine wave, which is the current wave shape that the LFO is. We can go in here, and actually bin might be interesting here, where we get a more randomized action that's going to happen whenever the LFO changes its shape. It will change the position inside the where it's playing again across the chord. Right now it's not done anything, but it will change at some point, and I might just speed it up a bit as well so you can see what's going on. So it's now just doing a bit more of a random action through the chord. And if we change, for example, things like the smooth over here, we can take these square edges off the bin shape a bit and make it more rounded. All right, so that's pretty cool. We've already got this chord now and sequence doing something quite different to what it was doing earlier. So let's map this other LFO here. Let's turn it on and let's map that to the low pass filter frequency knob here, so we can get that modulating as well. And then we might choose to slow this down a bit. And we might bring up the lower range here from 0% so that it doesn't filter right down to 0. It filters down to the point where we want it to filter. So maybe even 50% is about right. So that means I'm controlling the range here that the LFO is able to pull that filter frequency down. And I don't want it to pull it all the way down to 0. So I think around something like 55%. That's pretty cool. And again, we can change, you know, its wave shape. I'm quite happy with the sine wave. Maybe I'll speed it up. Yeah, that's cool. So we've got some nice modulation happening now with these LFOs. The next thing I'm going to do is go over and start to grab some FX so that I can just shape this sound a little bit further. And I do have an FX rack here that I've already sort of built up but I will explain what it's all about. So I'm just going to drag that over and drop it in behind these LFOs. Just wait for that to load up. Gotta love the old rainbow spinning wheel. And what this is all about is, you know, when you've got a bunch of favorite audio effects that you're always kind of using, and particularly if you're designing sounds like this, it's a pretty simple process of just heading over to Ableton's audio effects and grabbing a couple of your favorites here. Like maybe we always use the drum bus, so we grab that, and we always use the delay when we're shaping our sounds and making new sounds. Maybe we always use an EQ. And then, you know, quite simply, I just close those down, use Shift on my keyboard, select those three effects, Command G, and put them into a group. And then I can turn this group of effects on and off, and I can start to add all my favorite audio effects into this group. And in some of the ones I have in my own workflow, there's Ableton and third party, but today we're just looking at third party, just Ableton only. So you can create your own effect racks, and it makes life a lot easier. You can just drag and drop this straight into an idea you're working on, turn on the ones you want to use, and come up with the sound you're looking for. So I'm going to delete that example, and you'll see in my example, I've got drum bass, saturator, redux, erosion, add distortion, some are presets within Ableton's audio effects, some favorites like warm tube or hot driven tape. I've got beat repeats, frequency shifters, delays, grain delays, flanges, and all sorts. So let's turn this on and start to shape the sound using some of these effects. So let's have a listen. I'm going to have probably a bit of drum bus here at the start. And if we turn that on, we can see that I'm using a little bit of medium drive, and I've got a little bit of crunch dialed in up here, and the dry wet is 23%, so we're just adding a little bit of flavor. I probably don't want to change too much the character of the sound in a distortion, aggressive kind of way. So if we were to turn on saturator, you can hear it's getting much more kind of gritty and distorted. And if we were to go over to our effects and grab amp and turn that on, if we're looking for an aggressive sound, you know, things like amp and distortion, saturator and stuff can be good for adding that layer of grit and distortion. But I think my chord sample already has some pretty cool tones in it, and I don't really need to be doing that. So most of these first effects here are about adding color. I don't really need to add any color. In my opinion, I'm pretty happy with the color of the sound. Drum bus is nice, gives it a little bit of glue and a little bit of fatness. That's enough for me. I now am going to look for some of the effects in this rack that more modulate the sound further than the LFOs we already have. So if I come to the frequency shifter and turn that one on, and I go inside here, if I dial a little bit of the fine knob up, and then the LFO inside the frequency shifter, you'll hear straight away the sound got really nice and wide. So we can bring a little frequency modulation in here. We could also choose to go down a bit on the frequency. Dial that into taste, so we've now got modulation within this effect happening as well. I'm going to leave it up a little bit like that. And I might back the dry wet off a bit here, so you can hear it with no frequency shifter. Turning it on and off to check what I like about it. That's cool. And the next thing I'm going to do is go into grain delay and turn on grain delay. And I'll bring down the dry wet. And if I bring up the dry wet a little bit, you get that really nice delay happening in the background. Maybe a little bit of feedback. We can experiment with different ratios here. So 2 is much tighter, or triplets using the 3. I like the 3. And then what I might do is just use a little bit of the random pitch here as well, and the grain delay. Further randomize the pitch a little bit. You could also try the actual pitch here of the plugin. That is pretty cool. And we could also try the spray here, bringing a little bit of spray in and out. Again, which is rather cool. So what we could do here is go over to LFOs again. So if we go to Max for Live and we grab a couple more LFOs and drop some new ones in here. I'm making, you know, a bit more of a complex patch here, but I want sort of something that isn't just going to be really stale and stagnant and it's just a sequence with that simpler attached to it. We're making something that's really our own and really interesting here. So I'm going to take this LFO, one of these, and I'm going to map this first one here to the spray in the grain delay. So let's have a listen. That's pretty cool. And I'm now going to again just control the range of how much of this modulation I want to happen and also how fast I want the LFO to be working on that. I might just bring the range in a little bit. Something like that. I quite like it being at 0 here and just trimming the top of it a little bit so it doesn't go all the way to the top of the spray. And maybe let's try a faster LFO rate. I think I prefer that a little bit slower. We've got a little bit of that character, and again we could try something other than a sine wave. Bin could be interesting. Triangle could be interesting. I'm actually going to leave that at bin, and I might just again smooth it a little bit so the square edges are a little bit rounded off. Nice, I like that vibe. And then I'm going to do the same with the pitch. I'm going to turn on the next LFO and map that to pitch. Now it's going to get quite crazy. So again, I'm just going to control the range of the LFO so it doesn't go too extreme. And I'm just doing that by ear, just deciding when I like the range that it's playing through of the frequency in the grain delay. And again, we have the same options. We can slow down our LFO, so it moves really slowly through the... I like that. So we've now got more than enough modulation going on. This sound has really evolved quite a lot. So then I might just look at the far end here of my audio effect favorites, and I'm now going to add just a little bit of sort of reverb and color to the sound and get it in context there. So maybe a bit of chorus. Turning it on and off to check what we're doing to the sound. Quite like just a little bit of chorus like that. 50% wet. A reverb. Now these reverbs that I've got here, these are the convolution reverbs from Max for Live. So again, if you go into Max for Live and you're looking at the category of reverb, so sorry, we'll go over here to my browser and we pull up, again, audio effects, and we go down here, you'll see convolution reverbs, and some of these, I've got 3 favorites here: Real Plate, Dirty Spring, and Giant Basilica. Is it Basilica? I think so. Yes, it is. Right, and these are amazing. You could just have the default Ableton reverb here, but these are, you know, providing you with something a lot more interesting as they are a convolution reverb, and a discussion, we can have a discussion about that another day, but it uses real impulses, and you have a reverb that uses a real space or a real sound and a real impulse, and that adds a lot more flavor to adding a reverb to a sound. So I like the dirty spring here, so I'm going to turn that on. And again, I'm just going to back off the dry wet of the dirty spring, just dial it into taste. I just want a little bit of color, so A being that, turning it on and off, that's pretty cool, I like that. Now I'm going to add a bit of glue compression just to glue this all together nicely, so we'll turn that on. I've got it at the moment set at the ratio of 2, and the threshold's pretty low. I just want a little bit of compression here, and I'm just going to adjust the attack and release time. Slower attack. Turning it on and off again. That's pretty cool, I like that. It's glued things together nicely. EQ8, roll off any low end that doesn't need to be there. Again, that's pretty good, maybe just back it off a little bit. Leave some space for later when we've got bass lines and things going on. We don't want this melodic idea to be clogging up low end. So yeah, that's my reason for having that there and rolling off the low ends. Now I've got one third-party thing going on here, and this is in this rack, and it's the Ozone Imager, which I like to use. It's a free download from Isotope, because it gives you a nice image of what's going on in the stereo field. So if we're looking at our creation so far, this is what it looks like in the Ozone Imager. And right at the end here, I've got a utility that is a mono utility, which you can grab out of the Ableton audio effects. You just go to the audio effects, come down to utility, open it up, and you can choose the mono out of the presets. And I just use that. I'm now going to turn that on and check what my stereo width is like when it's shrunk down to mono. So if we know it's nice and wide because we can see that here. How does it sound when we check it in mono? It's pretty good. I'm happy with that. We haven't pushed it too wide and too crazy, so I'll turn that off now. That's just there to check. And finally, I'm now going to open up an audio track alongside my MIDI track with a chord on it, and I'm going to route the audio from this chord MIDI track into this audio track. So I'm going to choose up here the audio from that chord track. I'm going to arm that track, and I'm now going to play, and I'm just going to check here what sort of volumes I get when this plays through, and I'm currently sitting at around -3 in this little box up here that I can keep clicking and resetting on the channel fader, and I'm looking for somewhere around about -1, so that sort of says to me that I can still add a little bit more weight to this sound. So I'm actually going to come over here and turn on this color limiter, which is another Max for Live device that you will find inside of Max. We can even go up to the search bar here and just put color, and in theory it'll pop up there. It's inside of my Max audio effects. This is an absolute beast of a audio effect, so I'm going to turn it on here, and I'll slowly bring up the loudness knob over here, just until I see a slight tiny flicker over here on the meter. And what I might do as well is just adjust these knobs down the bottom here of the saturation and the release. So I'm going to bring the release in a little bit to tighten it up, like that, and dial up a little bit of saturation. Turn it off, turn it on, can still bring it up a bit more. Now I'm just starting to get that flickering happening here, so I might just back it off slightly. And you'll see now over on our audio track that is metering the sound from the chord. It's now at -0.5 there, as opposed to before it was around -3. So it's now pretty close to a level that I think would be good to record into. It's now sitting around -1. So I'm now going to record this MIDI track into that audio track and make myself an audio loop of this musical idea. So we're ready to go. I'm going to click record here in the first empty clip slot on the audio track. Sometimes you might have just, when you clicked in to record that, it might not have started at the beginning of the sequence. It may not have re-triggered where you wanted the sequence to begin from. So I'm just going to re-record down below until I hear that it's re-triggered the way I wanted it to be. That's it. And so now we can open up that audio clip and have a look and monitor it as it's recording into here. And if we're making a track and we want a lot of modulation and movement, we can record this for many, many bars here and allow this to be a very long take of all that modulation and action that's happening inside of our MIDI track. So we'll let this run for a little bit. And you can hear all those little changes that are happening inside the grain delay, the filters opening and closing on the simpler, all that modulation we brought in, the modulation of the sound moving through the chord sample. Go for a little bit longer, and then I'm just going to come up to the clip here and push the red record arrow right there, and that stops the recording, and it stops it on the beat for us when you do it that way, rather than just pushing your space bar and stopping the clip. So we've now got this nice long take of our melodic idea, and we can actually come over here. I'll delete that clip that wasn't triggering from the right point, and I can turn off everything in that chord track, the effect racks, and shrink that down, and the chord sample and everything that's in here. We can switch it all off if we like, so that there's no CPU going on there. And we now have our melodic part, so we can just drag over this audio clip into a new track, delete that record in track or leave it there if you like, and activate this new audio track. And now what I would probably do personally myself is duplicate this audio clip of our recording. So I've got the full take in one clip, and we can even go to it, Command R, name it the original. And then with this one here, I'm probably going to loop up a couple of bars, so just highlight a couple of bars inside the clip, like so. Command L to loop it, and I'm just going to scroll through the clip looking for a nice section of the recording that I want to use. That's quite cool. And I'll just use this as an example so we're not here all day, but maybe I choose this section here as the loop I now want to use in my track. So I can have that section selected here, right click the mouse and choose crop sample, and now I've got a loop of that particular section, and I've still got the whole take down the bottom here. So it's really your decision. We could use this whole take and have all that variation going on, or we can do what I've just done, and that is crop a clip of just a selection that you like, and we've now got our first idea for this track starting from 0. So that's going to be where I'm going to leave it for today, and the next time we come back to this we'll be adding a bass line to this and then, as I said, we'll go on and do atmospheres, drones, pads. We'll delete that drum track and make all of our own drums. So I hope you've enjoyed this video, and as I said, you know, love to hear your feedback and comments. If you can leave them down below in YouTube when this is uploaded to YouTube. Let me know if you've got any questions. Pop them in the comments section and I'll get back to you and answer your questions. And yeah, obviously if you enjoy the content and the video, obviously like the video, subscribe, and ring the bell to receive future notifications when I'm uploading to the channel. And thank you, of course, for tuning in and watching, and connect with you guys and girls again soon. All right. Ciao for now, everybody. Have a good one. Ciao.